the Blackhawks take with the second overall pick? I'll discuss the latest rumors and we'll dive into Igor Chernyshov's NHL Draft Profile.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, just a quick reminder to everyone who's watching on YouTube right here, right now, to please go and hit that like button for me. Comment down below as well as to your thoughts on who the Blackhawks should take with the second overall pick, as we're now just over a week removed from day one of the NHL Draft. And also, if you didn't get to reach out with your Mailbag Monday question for this week, go and drop those in the comment section down below as well. Obviously, I won't be able to get to them on today's show, but I'll bookmark all of them and we'll give you an answer this time next week. So make sure to jump on down in the comment section, and also make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well. Lots of great stuff coming over these next couple of weeks. I still got some NHL draft profiles to get into. I'm also going to be dishing out my 2024 top 10 rankings later on this week, followed by a full first round mock draft starting early next week. And oh yeah, later on this week, tomorrow actually, I'm going to be getting into the final part of my Blackhawks summer 2024 top prospects list, as well as some free agents that I think the Blackhawks should target come July 1st. Even though we're fully in the midst of the summer and the Blackhawks haven't played hockey for, 2 months now, still a lot going on, a very meaningful time of the offseason. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't done so already. Last but certainly not least, apologies for all the rambling. Today's episode, I got to let you all know, is sponsored by FanDuel. Go and sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon if you're a new member to get $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. All right, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on when you're listening to this. As always, thank you all again for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. I hope everyone out there had themselves a phenomenal weekend, had a happy Father's Day yesterday. It's a scorcher here in the Chicagoland area today, 95 degrees outside by me at least, so hope everyone out there is staying cool. And as I alluded to off the top, a lot going on with the Chicago Blackhawks right here, right now, and over the next couple of weeks. And with another weekend having gone by, that means we just continue to creep closer and closer to this year's NHL Draft. Now just 11 days away as things kick off next Friday on June 28th. And we know Macklin Celebrini is going number one overall to the San Jose Sharks. That's been clear cut, even since well before the Sharks won the draft lottery. We knew it was the slacken for Macklin sweepstakes, but the draft really gets started this year when the Blackhawks hit the clock at number 2. And as we're starting to inch towards the draft, and the scouting combine was a couple of weeks ago, we're starting to hear some rumblings about what a couple of these teams could be doing. And for the Blackhawks, it's basically been a two-horse race for the most part between Artyom Levshunov, the defenseman from Michigan State, and Ivan Demidov, the highly skilled forward out of Russia, between who the Blackhawks are going to take with the second overall pick. But with Demidov obviously being Russian, he wasn't allowed to attend the scouting combine. And that's really when we started, I think, to hear these rumors of the Blackhawks taking Artyom Levshunov, number 2 overall. We heard Levshunov in his interview with the Blackhawks media. First off, just show that he's a really good kid, has a good sense of humor, shook everyone's hands, seems like a good lad. But he also told us that the Blackhawks, met with him several times. They were also the only team to take him out to dinner. So seems like the Blackhawks have their fingerprints, paws all over Artyom Levshunov with the second overall pick here. And we're starting to hear even more rumblings from that again as we're nearing the NHL draft closer and closer. Scott Powers of The Athletic, in a podcast that he posted late last week, along with Mark Lazarus from The Athletic as well, said that he'd be pretty stunned at this point if the Blackhawks didn't wind up going with the Belarus native and the big right-handed defenseman in Artyom Levshunov with the second pick. To quote Scott Powers, and segment 1, by the way, is going to be filled with a handful of quotes here. Powers said, "I think there's a small chance that it's Anton Salayev," which I really would be absolutely stunned by. But I would be surprised if it wasn't Artyom Levshunov. They're going to meet with Ivan Demidov next week in Florida, and I think there's a small chance that they see or he talks to them and something sells them. But everything points to Levshunov. There's enough uncertainty around Demidov that Levshunov seems like a clear bet from an NHL team's perspective. And we've even seen, numerous scouts and analysts kind of predict Artyom Levshunov to go second overall in their latest mock drafts. Will Scouching from Scouching has Levshunov going second in his latest mock draft. And also, Corey Pronman of The Athletic as well last week released an article about the quotes and what he's hearing from some of the top front office executives and from some scouts about some of these top prospects in this year's draft. And he went on to share those in his article, obviously anonymous quotes, but I thought that was really cool and gives us a little bit of insight on what these teams are thinking about all of these prospects. And there were some really interesting ones about Ivan Demidov. It seems like he's kind of shaping up. When I went through his draft profile, I said, Anton Salayev is the wild card of this year's draft because I think he could go, third or fourth overall, but also could fall as far as number 12 or number 13. It sounds like Ivan Demidov is starting to become a little bit more of a wild card in teams' minds, and there is the potential for him to even fall to number 5 or maybe even further if the Blackhawks don't take him with the second overall pick. Here were some of the quotes from these execs and scouts that Corey Pronman shared in his article about Ivan Demidov. Quote, "Give me a break where all the lists have Demidov. He's lighting up the MHL, but that league is so bad. Michkov was great versus men over there and went 7th. The one thing I will say about that, obviously, the 2023 NHL draft was much deeper than this year's draft. I think that had a great deal to do with Michkov sliding all the way to 7th overall as well. And if he were in this draft, he would no doubt be the number 2 overall pick and probably put in a good run for number 1 with Macklin Celebrini. So I get what he's trying to say, though, at the same point in time. There is that risk with Demidov because he has been playing in the NHL, which is not known as a very good junior league. So interesting to hear that from a scout. Another one. Quote, Demidov has a chance to be the next great Russian star in the NHL. He's a game breaker. So a little bit of a polarizing view there. Next one, his skating is awkward looking. I don't know of many, if any, NHL forwards who skate quite like him. He's a dynamic player, obviously, but in the top 5, there's a lot of risk for me with the feet, size, position, and nationality. I'd be more comfortable with him closer to 6 to 10 in this draft. Next one. I can tell you who may be the best hockey player. This honestly might be the most meaningful quote surrounding Demidov's position and how the front offices view him. I could tell you who may be the best hockey player, but if it's my job at stake and I have to pick between the super talented Canadians or a 5'11" Russian winger, I'm probably taking the Canadians. Again, just kind of shows you the risk going on involved with Demidov. Last one, quote, his skating looks a little weird, but the result is still good. He was dominant in their junior league, back-to-back MVP of that league, and he was so good in their playoffs. He looks like a potential star. So again, it just kind of depends on who you're asking about Ivan Demidov, but at this point in time, it does seem like NHL general managers, this doesn't mean Kyle Davidson is thinking the same thing, but based on these quotes, some general managers do, in fact, feel like there is a lot of risk there. It seems like everyone likes him except for, that first scout that I read off. But at number 2 overall, seems like some teams would have a hard time making that selection, all things considered. Now, as far as the Chicago Blackhawks situation goes, there's multiple rumors now that they're leading Artyom Levshunov. I wouldn't be upset with the pick. I think he shapes up to be the best defenseman, the most stable and secure, less risk inflicted defenseman of this year's draft class. I don't know if he has the best runway. I think Zane Parekh has higher upside. I think Zeev Buium has higher upside. But in terms of a safety net, I think Artyom Levshunov is a very safe pick. However, the reason why I want the Blackhawks to go with Demidov is because I do feel like they're in a little bit of a position to swing upside. They have a very deep prospect pool, but they need guys who have high-end abilities, and that's Ivan Demidov. And I know the risk. I know, the nationality concerns and him playing in a not very good junior league and the skating deficiencies. 10-2 skaters, we don't really see them whatsoever in the NHL. I understand all of that. However, the upside to me is just so undeniable, and I think the Blackhawks, again, are at a point where they can think upside. So we'll see where Kyle Davidson winds up going at this point in time. It sounds like Artyom Levshunov is the favorite. I haven't looked at the betting odds, but I'd assume he's the betting favorite as well. Go and jump in the comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts on that, on the Blackhawks rumored to be leaning towards Artyom Levshunov. Scott Powers says he'd be pretty shocked if it wasn't Levshunov at this point. Let me know your thoughts on that matter. The Demidov versus Levshunov debate is we're now just over a week away from day one of the 2024 NHL Draft. All right, there are my thoughts on the latest rumors surrounding Artyom Levshunov. Coming up in just a moment here, I still have to get into Igor Chernyshov's 2024 NHL Draft Profile. But first, I got to talk to you all real quick about the fine folks over at FanDuel. It's playoff time in both the NBA and the NHL. We've reached the NBA championship between the Stars and the Mavericks, the NHL final, Stanley Cup in the building as the Oilers are taking on the Florida Panthers. And oh yeah, baseball is also back in full swing, and FanDuel is your perfect place to bet on every single game. And right now, new customers get $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed when they visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Yes, you heard me right. $150 with your first bet being a win or a loss. It doesn't matter. $150 worth of bonus bets deposited right into your account, and you can use these bonuses to bet on everything from slam dunks en route to the NBA championship, or slap shots on the way to the Stanley Cup, or even home runs across all the great ballparks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Go and make your first bet an automatic win by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $150 worth of bonus bets if you're a new member. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2 just got done talking about big right-handed Belarusian defenseman Artyom Levshunov and the debate over who will go number 2 overall between he and Russian winger Ivan Demidov. Well, I actually have another Russian winger to talk about on today's show, and that's none other than Igor Chernyshov, as he's the next NHL draft profile that I'm going to get into. I only have a couple more of these left, probably the last week that I'm actually going to be doing them as well. And early next week, I will have maybe not so one player specific profiles coming out. Maybe I'll do 3 or 4 and go through them real quick, all in one segment, over some guys who I think could be good selections for the Blackhawks at number 34, because I've gotten a lot of comments about that. And I want to make sure you, the viewers, feel like you're fully up to date with all the knowledge, the best knowledge possible going into this year's NHL draft. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on any of those. And just another quick reminder, if there's a certain player you want to hear more about, I've gone over all the big names in this year's draft at this point in time. You can easily find all of those episodes on my YouTube channel under the 2024 NHL Draft Profile playlist, and everything is also time-coded down in the description, so you don't got to scroll and find that certain point. You can quickly jump to that point in the episode. But getting into Igor Chernyshov, as I mentioned, not in the same breath as Ivan Demidov, not held in that same class, but the next best Russian winger on the board in the 2024 NHL draft. 6'2", 200-pound left winger that turned 18 back in November. So one of the older players in this year's draft class. And he bounced between the MHL and the KHL this year. The MHL, of course, the league that Ivan Demidov was playing in as well, and put up unbelievable numbers there. Chernyshov still found success, but didn't quite put up the ground-breaking numbers that Demidov did. 28 points in 22 MHL games this year for Chernyshov, 13 goals and 15 assists. Played in 34 KHL games, though. Spent most of his time there. Kind of bounced back and forth, but I like to see that he ultimately ended up with more professional games than junior games than he had over in Russia. And in those 34 games, 4 points, 3 goals, and 1 assist. But a very tough situation, for a 18-year-old kid to be in, playing against grown men, thrown right into that league. And he is expected to go back to the KHL next year with Dynamo. How long is he going to be over there? That's always the million-dollar question with these Russians. Not as clear-cut as it is with Ivan Demidov. His agent has been pretty outspoken about his desire to come over to North America once his contract runs up. As far as the rankings go for Igor Chernyshov, 19th by Elite Prospects, 18th by Bob McKenzie, 22nd by Craig Button, 15th by Tony Ferrari, 38th by McKean's Hockey. He's the only one that has Chernyshov going outside of the first round. 18th by Chris Peters, 20th by Daily Faceoff, 18th by Sportsnet, and 13th by Dobber prospects. So as high as number 13, as low as number 38, but for the most part, most of these scouts and analysts have him somewhere between, number 18 and number 23, 24. Breaking down the skills, the strengths and weaknesses here for Chernyshov, though, the first thing that stands out to me is he's a pretty smooth skater for a player of his size, a sharp skater, I would say. Really good edge work, really good crossovers, really good straight line speed. Maybe not, the best of this draft class, but for a player of his size, he moves very well. And that's always encouraging for NHL scouts, especially seeing this kid possess that already at a young age, and along with the good mechanics to make you feel confident that he's only going to get better and better over the next couple of years. And altogether, he just plays a really effective, simple and straightforward game, passing, reading plays, nothing like too flashy like Ivan Demidov. He's kind of the polar opposite right winger, or left winger, I guess you could say, than Demidov is. It's not flashy. It's not making a ton of highlights, but it certainly is effective out there. I would say his best offensive abilities are his anticipation. Reads plays really well at a high speed, which again, I think is something that NHL clubs are going to like, and they could see transitioning over to the next level. He thinks plays out in front of him really well, really good on the rush, good on odd man rushes. Anticipates what defenders are going to do. So he just has some really good vision, some really good passing. I would say that's probably passing or shooting. I think he's going to be more of a playmaker at the next level, but does possess a good shot, is capable of blowing it by an opposing goaltender from time to time, but nothing too special in that department, but pretty good as far as an overall offensive makeup. An underrated skill of his, I think, is how he's already able and knowledgeable enough to know how to utilize his body in order to kind of shield off puck carriers. He's, again, not very fancy with the puck handling, and he's just kind of a north and south player, but uses that frame of his really well to kind of create some time, create some space, and then uses that also with his vision to kind of put everything together as far as his offensive makeup. And for being, 18 years old, he played a hard game in the KHL from what I read, willing to get into battles, battling hard in front of the net. So really good power forward frame and a really good power forward two-way game for a kid of his age already playing against grown men. As far as the weaknesses go, again, kind of at this point in the draft, it's just what exactly is the upside, because I don't see Chernyshov being a very gifted goal scorer at the next level. He doesn't necessarily have any elite offensive traits. I like how he reads defenses and has that good vision. I think, there's runway there, but just exactly how high is it with a little bit of a capped skill set? I also don't see him being, a dominant puck carrier at the next level. I think he's a good skater and can be okay at it, but he doesn't really possess the stick handling or the deking ability to kind of weave his way through traffic and enter the offensive zone through checkers. And again, he plays on the wing. He's not a center. So those are always valued a little bit lower than centers at the next level. So as far as my projection for Igor Chernyshov, look, I think he could shape up to be an effective middle six winger who could maybe play on the second power play unit. I think he's, although more likely to play on the penalty kill than he is the power play. But there's a lot of risk here as well, just like there is with Ivan Demidov. Obviously, the capped upside, as I just outlined, he's playing in the MHL and didn't, even put up that groundbreaking of numbers there, was barely over a point per game, which I'm not going to bat an eye at, but it's nothing that necessarily jumps off the charts. I don't exactly know what his plan is for when he wants to come over to North America. Again, he plays on the wing. So all those reasons, yeah, there's a lot to like here. And I think he plays a mature game that can translate to the next level. And you like the experience he's getting at a young age, but I think he's probably a 20 to 25 pick in this year's draft. I think number 18 is maybe just a little too early for the Blackhawks, but someone in the first round is going to see the frame, is going to see the mold, and they're going to take him. I don't see any way that he falls to the Blackhawks at number 34, but again, 18 is probably just a little bit too early for me, and kind of jumped the gun there. A long-term fit with the Blackhawks. Like, I think his size would be good. I wouldn't be pissed with the pick. I think there's stuff to like there. But I feel like the Blackhawks are in this situation, going back to segment 1, where they could be swinging for upside in the first round of this year's draft, whether that's at number 2 or at number 18. And this really isn't too much of an upside pick for me. There are some other guys that I personally would rather take. Liam Greentree, obviously, is my personal ideal selection for the Blackhawks at 18 if he makes it there. But I also have Konsta Helenius Michael Brandzag-Nygaard and Michael Hage over Igor Chernyshov, if I'm being honest. So we'll see what winds up happening if he gets selected in the first round. But there is Igor Chernyshov's 2024 NHL Draft Profile coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans. Don't go anywhere because I still have to get into our weekly Mailbag Monday fan segment. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, just a quick reminder to please go and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, jump on in the comment section down below. A good reminder, good time for the reminder. Getting into Mailbag Monday here. If you have a Blackhawks question that you want me to answer before the NHL draft, next week's Mailbag Monday will be the last one that I do before the NHL draft. So make sure to get your questions in, whether that's in the comment section down below. You can jump into any one of my personal accounts at Jack Bushman 2, at Talkin' Hockey, at capital L, capital O _Blackhawks on X. You can email LockedOnBlackhawks on YouTube, LockedOnBlackhawks at gmail.com, or jump into the community tab on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. So many ways for you to reach out with your question. Please, please, please make sure to do so because I can't do this segment if you don't interact with me. So I greatly appreciate you helping me by reaching out with those questions. First one I'm going to get into here today, though, comes from at Venus Cook, a last-minute question on X, who asked, who do you think the Hawks will sign in free agency? Well, I'm not going to give a full spoiler here because on tomorrow's episode, I'm going to be talking about the top free agent defenseman that I think the Blackhawks should pursue. And then in an episode later on in the week, I'll get into the top free agent forwards that I think the Blackhawks should pursue. I've already gone over the free agent goaltenders in this year's draft, so I'm not going to give out any names in particular here. Vince, I believe it was, who asked this question, but I will tell you to tune into those episodes in particular because I do think the Blackhawks, there's an opportunity they maybe get a veteran cheap goaltender in free agency this year. It's not the most likely option, but it could happen. I also do believe they're going to be trying to add someone on the right side to shore up the defense a little bit to make sure, Kevin Korchinski and whoever's going to be stepping onto the scene on the left-hand side, whether that's Ethan Del Mastro, Wyatt Kaiser, Nolan Allen, so on and so forth. They need a little bit more of a sturdier defensive partner alongside them. I love Connor Murphy's effort. I love his hustle. He hasn't been healthy or consistent enough. I think the Blackhawks need more help there. And then Kyle Davidson has been rumored to be looking at a top 6 and a top 9 forward. One guy in particular I would be keeping an eye on is Max Domi potentially reuniting here in Chicago after signing that one-year deal in Toronto. The two sides really enjoyed each other's company, so that's one name I'll be keeping an eye on, but not going to give out too many spoilers here in particular with those episodes coming out later this week. Make sure to stay tuned for that. Next question comes from at EZC_PS4 on X, who asked, who do you honestly think are the top 3 contenders for pick 18, and what is the likelihood that they move it instead? Probably 50-50. I think Kyle Davidson wants to move. It's just whether or not he finds a suitor and whether the asking price meets something that they will be willing to do. That's ultimately what it comes down to. But I firmly believe Kyle Davidson is trying to make moves. We know that's kind of right up his forte. I give it a 50-50 shot. Top 3 contenders at number 18. Liam Greentree is my number 1. He fell to 18 in the Locked On NHL mock draft. I know there are some people concerned about his skating. I personally think his size and offensive abilities and all the intangibles that he possesses as well are things that are really going to sway Kyle Davidson in that direction, should he be available. I love Greentree at 18. I also wouldn't hate Michael Hage. I know I didn't exactly give him the highest rating when I broke down his draft profile, but in terms of likely options to make it to number 18, I certainly would not mind Michael Hage. There seems to be a connection there. He obviously played for the Chicago Steel as well, so the Blackhawks have got a lot of good looks at him. Consta Helenius, I would think would be a good pick at number 18 in terms of the value. Michael Brandzag-Nygaard, if he doesn't get drafted by the Red Wings, although I kind of expected, I think he would be a good pick. So I'll go Greentree, Consta Helenius, and Michael Hage. Next question comes from at BlackhawkX Hockey on X, who asked, people seem to think Levshunov can improve significantly on the defensive end with NHL development. Which defenseman in years past can you remember that improved their defensive play over the course of their career who had concerns on that end in their draft year? Putting me on the spot a little, I mean, I could just say the Hugheses. Obviously, there's defensive worries about their game because they're undersized and more puck movers and known for their offensive traits. I think, Quinn has turned into a pretty sound all-around defenseman for the Vancouver Canucks. Now, is he known for his defensive ability? No, but he has made strides in those areas and is known as one of the best defensemen in all of hockey. How about Duncan Keith? How about Duncan Keith? I know that's a long time ago, but not drafted to be like your prototypical shutdown Norris Trophy winning defenseman as an undersized guy who's known as a past first defenseman. He turned out to be pretty good in the defensive zone as well. Drew Doughty, someone who came in a little bit undersized, had some concerns too. So, like, it's definitely possible. What I will say about this, though, is I think all the defensemen coming into this year's draft need work on the defensive side of things, but Levshunov is kind of the one that I'm not worried about in that area the most. If anything, I think offensively, even though he was nearly a point per game in college, I do think that's kind of where he's going to have to find his stride. I think he's going to be a good and reliable defender, and that's why I think he's like a second pairing type of guy. And that kind of goes into my argument about why I'd lean Ivan Demidov. I don't know if Levshunov has the highest upside, but I think he's going to be a very safe pick and is going to be a very good NHL defenseman. I've seen an analyst say at worst you have a bigger John Klingberg on your hands because of what he's already able to do and the way that he's able to move the puck at the same point in time. I'm confident that Artyom Levshunov is going to be a good defender. So I think that's just a little bit overblown. All the defensemen in this year's class are going to need a little bit of work. And it does happen more than you would think. Next question that I need to get into, I lost my page here. I apologize real quick. Comes from at Tarun Kalra 1091 on YouTube. I apologize if I completely butchered that name. Jack. Picks 7, 10, 11 in round one being shopped. If we take on a significant bad contract, say 6 to 7 million per year for next 2 years plus pick 18, these teams want help now. What better help than 7 million to sign a strong free agent? We are then in a position to take Demidov at 2 and one of the top tier defensemen with the other high first rounder. How does this not seem perfect? I think in theory it sounds really good. Where do I want to start this here? Well, first off, the 7th overall pick belongs to the Ottawa Senators. The 10th overall pick belongs to the New Jersey Devils. The 11th overall pick belongs to the Buffalo Sabres. When diving into Buffalo and Ottawa, I don't necessarily see a bad contract that the Blackhawks would be willing to take on. Nothing kind of in terms of the high AAV that I think would kind of make this deal work. Neither of those two teams necessarily, I think, have the pieces that they're trying to sell that the Blackhawks would want to take on. The New Jersey Devils are the interesting one. I think Andre Palat is a dead cap option for the Chicago Blackhawks with 3 years left on his deal. It might be 1 year too long for Kyle Davidson. It might be 1 year longer than he would like, but it also might be the asking price to move up from number 18 to number 10. So I do think that's a potential scenario. But the other teams, it's just kind of hard to make a deal work. Like in terms of a bad contract to take on, I don't necessarily see those paths coinciding as much as it does with the Blackhawks and the New Jersey Devils potentially at number 10. I do think that's an option, probably the best option for Kyle Davidson if he wants to trade up inside of the top 15. Next question comes from at RyFlu4344. Odds Hawks trade up from 34 into the first round like they did with Rinzel. Yeah, back in the 2022 NHL draft, the day they started with no first round picks and wound up with 3. I could see it. Now it would have to be if someone notable probably wound up and fell, I would have to assume. But I certainly wouldn't rule out with Kyle Davidson's aggression. I don't think it's as likely as the Blackhawks trading up from number 18, but certainly in the realm of possibility, especially if they see someone with really strong upside. Again, I think they're in a position to take an upside swing. That's something that could make sense. Last but certainly not least, here from at Sam Poulter on YouTube, who asked, which top defenseman could slide out of the top 10 that the Hawks would trade up for? Ooh, very good question to wrap things up here. Carter Yakimchuk kind of seems like the wild card. It seems like a lot of scouts really like his game, but I do feel like he and Salayev are probably the two likely fallers out of the top 10. I see Levshunov absolutely going 2 or 3. Zeev Buium, I don't see falling out of the top 10. Zane Parekh is probably going in the top 10, and Sam Dickinson probably is as well. So for me, it's Salayev and Yakimchuk. I don't think the Blackhawks would be too interested in Salayev, given their left-hand side. But I do think Carter Yakimchuk could absolutely be interesting if he falls outside of the top 9, maybe even number 10 with the New Jersey Devils. All right, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show. You can follow me on X at Jack Bushman 2. Make sure to go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account as well at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. If you haven't done so already, make sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, even if you're someone who regularly tunes in on an audio platform. And if you do listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you may listen to your podcast, go and rate and review the show. That helps me out tremendously. Also, always puts a huge smile on my face. And again, if you have a question that you want me to answer before the NHL draft, next week's Mailbag Monday is the last one I'm doing before the Hawks make their pick with number 2 overall. Go and jump in the comment section down below. Reach out on any of my socials or email lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com. All right, until tomorrow's episode, everyone stay cool out there. I'll see you on the next episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.